How do you best apply a design layer that humanizes that data? That's sort of where, Conran's focus on humanization rather than personalization is probably a bit of a differentiator.
This is Velocitize Talks, and I'm Andy North. I'm joined today by Dominic Zammit, Head of Digital at Conran Design Group.
Hello.
Dominic, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me in.
So tell us a little bit about Conran, how it differentiates itself in a very crowded market.
Sure. So Conran Design Group's been sort of going for over 60 years now. We were originally founded by Sir Terence Conran, sort of one of the founding fathers of design. But we're now owned by the Havas Group, so about 20,000 people globally. And Conran makes up about 130 of those. So what it is that we see as our core differentiator is our belief in the power of design to drive strategic and commercial advantage for our clients ultimately. By that, what we mean is the layer that design can have that turns a personalized experience into a humanized experience. So what we've noticed over time is that boards and kind of company management teams are really starting to see the value in design of shaping the fortunes of their company over time. So we hope, and we're starting to see that our clients are relying on us to inject that design layer ultimately to bring consumers or customers or clients closer to their brands by creating experiences that are ultimately more human.
You are a dual threat. You are a lawyer by training and a technologist.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
What is the background there? How did a lawyer get all the way into this technology?
So I suppose I did a law degree and went to law school, but whilst I was at law school, I was working as an editor for a sort of legal publication that's now owned by Thomson Reuters. For various reasons, after flying all over the world, interviewing very much like this, partners in sort of the top law firms, it dawned on me that I was a much better editor, communicator, and sort of, I suppose, digital enthusiast than a lawyer, as it happened. so I ended up moving into this space for my sins.
Well, the world has benefited from having a technologist as opposed to yet another lawyer.
But hopefully.
So a little bit about your background. You're an aspiring musician and writer. How has that worked into sort of your worldview on how you approach your job at Conran? Sure.
So, I mean, aspiring musician is probably a little bit further from the truth than reality, but certainly writer, I will hopefully one day become. I suppose that kind of creativity is something that I think benefits me in my role. I'm not coming at digital marketing or digital consultancy from a technology background. I'm coming at it from a client experience perspective, and actually ultimately both my interest in and passion for writing and my interest and passion for digital spawn from an element of empathy ultimately. I like the way that through my writing I can engage and sort of communicate with people on a very specific level, and I like the way through my digital work I'm able to kind of motivate and inspire a reaction that I'm hopefully able to achieve for my clients.
Some would say that design and brand experience overall are sort of the intersection of art and science. Yeah. You've got the art, obviously, with the creative. You've got the science with the data.
Absolutely.
How do you see that? Do you see that continuing to evolve? Is that sort of evolution, that intersection?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the sort of relationship between data and design is an interesting one, and I mean, I think no one's really quite sure what that means yet. Everyone talks about data visualization and information design, but actually, we're starting to see companies like Spotify and others that are really using data as sort of the topic of their communication. So, you take the Spotify Christmas ads last year that were plastered all over the London Underground. They were all heroing basically data trends that they'd garnered through their customer relationship management, and the idea that data can move from being just sort of the driving force and the power behind segmentation into something that actually is a story in itself is quite an interesting one, and certainly for a design agency, it's something that's quite interesting for us to think about from a design challenge, because how do you best apply a design layer that humanizes that data? That's sort of where Conran's focus on humanization rather than personalization is probably a bit of a differentiator.
I like that, humanization. Is user experience becoming the new marketing? Is the look, feel, the overall feel that you get when you engage with a brand, is that really where we're going?
I think so, yeah. I mean, some might say that actually user experience is probably too siloed in some ways as well, and that actually it's much more about the customer experience in the widest possible sense.
Is digital experience or the overall brand experience where brands are starting to be made or broken?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said about what it is that makes a brand successful, and no one's quite got the answer to that. A lot of it is to do with sentiment and empathy and reaction generally. But I think it is that kind of holistic experience that will ultimately mean that you're a brand that's going to stick around for 6 months, or one that's going to have longevity and repeat loyalty. And again, that sort of humanizing I guess factor that design can bring in is probably the difference between a sort of brand that is quick off the mark and then quick in the ditch, and the one that will have slow and steady progress.
We talked a little bit about data, which leads me to privacy. And obviously everyone is dealing with that here in the EU, and even it's expanded to the US and around the world. How do you see things like GDPR affecting marketing and overall design going forward?
I mean, I think, GDPR is an interesting one because everyone has sort of named it the sort of enemy to marketing. But actually, in my view, it's sort of just given us a new look on how we tackle customer segmentation. It's forced us to be a little bit more mindful, actually, about who we're talking to. So hopefully the kind of output will be that we have much better marketing communications, much better advertising, because you can't just take a scattergun approach to targeting your marketing efforts anymore. I mean, I think it's going to, and it has caused a lot of issues for a lot of companies that have had to basically scrap their entire database of contacts. But the rebuilding of that will inevitably lead to a much, much stronger portfolio of data that they'll be able to use for both their marketing, but also more kind of ongoing customer relationship management as well.
Let's talk a little bit about technologies. Obviously, artificial intelligence is kind of the big buzzword right now. Everybody's trying to figure out how to use it, leverage it, and so forth. With blockchain being close behind, are there any technologies that you've worked with or you've seen that you see may not be right on the precipice right now, but in 3 to 5 years?
I mean, for me, it's not so much about new technology so much as the combination of existing technologies that is probably going to hold the most interest or longevity. I think there's a lot of talk about AI, as always. There's a lot of talk about virtual reality and sort of the whole new reality space. But for me, it's the combination of AI with VR and sort of MR, to be honest, that's going to hold the most game-changing potential, because again, it comes quite a lot back to data. The ability of artificial intelligence to learn from the data that we're garnering, particularly now it's much cleaner through GDPR, is immensely powerful. But to use that to drive immersive experiences through virtual reality or mixed reality, both in the consumer space, but also potentially in the corporate space. Take a corporate meeting in a law firm, for example. There's no reason that in 5 years that can't be held remotely through virtual reality, driven by an AI system that's going to capture all that information and probably come up with an answer to the client problem before the lawyer does. So I think for me, it's a lot of a lot of what's going on in the market at the moment is a lot of noise and it's very sensationalist, but I think once we get into a slight maturity of the market, we'll see kind of quite intricate combinations of AI driving VR experiences and sort of, you know, looking at how that VR experience can be used to augment a physical experience. That's probably where I think, you know, in 5 years we'll see the biggest gains.
Let's talk a little bit about secondary party data. That's become a big buzzword in the industry lately with so many different data sources pinging in and out. Does it have a growing role in the marketplace today?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, it's sort of been the unsung hero for quite a long time of many data strategies. You know, everyone has focused on first-party data, obviously. That's where the real commercial benefit is. Or they focus on third-party data, and that's where the whole sort of implementation of GDPR has got a little bit patchy. So over time, now that GDPR is in place, there's going to be a growing role of second-party data. And by that, I mean sort of the trade-off between organizations and brands, you know, willing to share their data for commercial gain, ultimately. You know, I think data's really seen as a commodity now. Everyone is viewing it as a commodity, as you would oil, as you would coal back in, well, the 70s. Yeah. And I think, you know, the commercialization of that data is an interesting area, and it's not one that I think has been properly either investigated from a legal perspective, you know, if you think about intellectual property, or from a kind of just general economics perspective. It's something, you know, you look at brand partnerships out there in the market. Data is always sort of nice to have at the end of it, but I think as we go further into this new world post-GDPR, it's going to become a primary consideration when you're looking at these brand tie-ups. You know, what data will this tie-up give me access to, and ultimately, what customer base does that give me access to?
And to take that discussion even further, personalization is something that a lot of people are trying to come to terms with and figure out how to use it and so forth. And the data plays into that, obviously. At Conran, are you doing any work around personalization? Or are your clients coming to you and saying, we're really trying to hone that and get down to some personalization?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think, you know, personalization for us can extend anywhere from the digital experience right through to the physical experience. I mean, ultimately, it's about creating engaging communications for your clients or customers. What we see as our, I guess, calling card, if you like, or what we should be offering to our clients is that layer of humanization that takes the personalized experience one step further, so that it's not just creepily following you around the internet. It's offering something that you can empathize with and will spark the right emotion in you, whether it's to be sensationalist or whether it's to get you to buy something. You know, there is a level of empathy that technology-driven personalization can't deliver, but design can. Right. So that's where we see our kind of dual technology consultancy and design, I guess, advice coming into play much more.
The market appears to be maturing in many ways, and as you said, it's transforming every day. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing there and what you're advising with your clients.
Sure. So I think for us, you know, as you say, the digital market, if you can call it that, is definitely going through a period of change, and it's different in many ways than we've ever seen, because it's a maturity that's bringing consideration and purpose right to the core of developing digital experiences. And what that actually ends up translating to is sort of a rationalization quite often of digital interventions or technology. You know, we're seeing, you know, what I coin it at work and with clients is sort of an analog renaissance almost, where people are sort of eager for or yearning for physical interactions to sort of counteract the digital flurry and hose pipe that they're being brandished at. So I think, you know, it's interesting. What what we're expecting to see over the next couple of years, or what I'm expecting to see over the next couple of years, is sort of less of the kind of gimmick-led digital marketing or digital for digital's sake, and much more consideration over whether digital is the right way to be engaging with the consumer. And if it is, how actually do those consumers want to engage with digital, and where in that consumer cycle or life journey do they want to engage with digital versus a physical space? Because we all know that digital has huge potential and power to connect people, to connect brands, to connect everyone, but it also has the potential to isolate. And so that kind of considerate use of digital is where I think the next sort of maturity of the market is going to go. It's going to look at people stripping back their digital armory a bit and focusing on what it is that's going to make tangible gains for them ultimately and retain customer loyalty in the long term.
That's actually fascinating, because as the head of digital, you would think the answer would be digital all the time, everywhere. But you can actually look at a given situation and say, I don't think digital may be the right answer here.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, I couldn't do my job properly without being that way. I mean, as you said, I have a passion for writing. I love analog in lots of ways. I won't use a Kindle. I will read a book. And I think, you know, what that hopefully brings our clients is a sense that we're advising them on what the very best application is for their consumer ultimately, rather than just upselling to feather our own nest. I mean, you know, I think that doesn't really work anymore. People see through the sort of facade of the mastery of technology and sort of the magic of digital. You know, people know now, clients know that there has to be a purpose to everything that we're doing. And so if we're asked to develop something that we don't think digital is the right platform for, we won't do it that way. We'll recommend, you know, a physical space or packaging or something else. And that's where the breadth of Conran's offer comes into play so powerfully.
I like your example of digital both being a uniter and a divider, or an isolator, I think were your words. I can see just with I have two teenagers, and they will be sitting with their friends, and they'll all be on their phone.
Yeah.
They're together, but they're alone.
Yeah.
So I've seen that firsthand, and I think that's a unique perspective that you just shared, that you can find ways to have digital engage people without just putting them in their own world.
So yeah, no, it's interesting. Google have just announced sort of a new design ethos for them that's driving all of their product development, all of their marketing initiatives, and it's all around JOMO, the joy of missing out, which is sort of the antithesis of the fear of missing out. Right. And the idea is that they're trying to design interactions and digital experiences that encourage you to actually take part in the physical environment around you and to put your phone down, actually, not engage with it so often, because they see their responsibility as a technology giant as a facilitator of communities and a facilitator of making those connections. And so in the long term, they know that they can't keep pumping people with digital interventions because it's just going to, well, blow their mind ultimately. So they're embracing that responsibility, and that's really interesting to see for us, because it sort of gives us a stamp of verification that we're right sometimes in saying, do you know what, digital's not right for you. You know, It's not the right thing to engage this audience.
One question we ask all our guests is there a book or books that you've read that you'd like to recommend to our viewers?
This is an interesting one because I don't read purposefully marketing and branding material. That might sound awful.
It could be any book.
Well, and I think if I was going to recommend an author, I'd encourage people to look at the likes of Edward St. Aubyn, author in the UK, Donna Tartt in the US, fantastic author, publishes maybe I think she's published 3 books in her career, which spans about 30 years. All of them have been best-selling. And what I like about her is that she has spent time, 10 years almost per book, perfecting every detail. And I think there's a lot to be learned from that approach to kind of communicating ultimately.
Thank you for your time and for your perspective. My guest today has been Dominic Zammit, Head of Digital for Conran Design Group. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me in.